Hello again. We're going to do a really quick review on recognizing subjects and verbs. I know you learned this at some point and could do it really well, so we're just going to go through this rather quickly. It's important to know how to recognize subjects and verbs so that you can learn to avoid sentence fragments, run-ons, and comma splices, which are considered the most serious types of grammatical errors that writers can make. You also, of course, will need to recognize subjects and verbs for when we study noun-verb agreement. The easiest way to find subjects and verbs is to find the verb first. Let's recall what the definition of verb is. The most common verbs are words that show action, such as jump, walked, run, slept, grow, and thought. Other verbs express a state of being. State of being verbs include all forms and tenses of the verb to be, such as is, are, was, were, have been, will be, could have been, should have been, might be, etc. Words such as feels, appears, looks, and seems are also considered state of being verbs. Now, remember that verbs also can include auxiliary or helping verbs. For example, has walked. The helping verb is has. Will sleep. The helping verb is will. Was reading. The helping verb is was. Will be going. The helping verb is will be, 2 words. Will have been attending. The helping verb is will have been, 3 words. Could have learned. The helping verb is could have. Did work. The helping verb is did. It's important to keep in mind that helping verbs are considered part of the verb. With that in mind, identify the verbs in these sentences. I'll give you a couple of minutes to jot them down very quickly. Okay, let's go through these and identify our verbs. First sentence, Marcy walked to work. The verb is walked. It's an action verb. Next, Andrea is Sophia's sister. The verb is. It's a state of being verb. Next sentence, Marissa dates Antonio, who is Jasmine's brother. The verbs are dates and is. Dates is an action verb, of course, and is a state of being verb. The river flows and tumbles through the valley. The verbs are flows, tumbles, both action verbs. Then we have Michelle and Alfredo stayed for the whole game, but Carmen and Jose left early. The verbs are stayed, left. At the top we have Nayeli seems like a nice woman. The verb is seems, a state of being verb. Next sentence, Brenda will have been working at the hospital for 5 years in November. Will have been working is the verb. That's all 4 words. Will have been working is the verb. Next we have Lee should have mowed the lawn, but he watched the game instead. The verbs are should have mowed, watched. Next we have, although Daniel felt fine, he went to see his doctor. The verbs are felt, went. And the last one is, I could have been a contender, And no, I'm not going to do my Marlon Brando imitation. The verb is could have been. Okay? Simple enough, huh? So, now we move to identifying the subject. It's important to keep in mind that every verb must have a subject that either performs the action or is referred to by the state of being verb that we find. Subjects are nouns or pronouns. The easiest way to identify a subject, then, is to find the verb and then ask yourself who or what performs the action or is referred to by the state of being verb. If we have the sentence, John kicks the ball, we ask, what is the verb? We find that the verb is kicks. It's an action word, right? So then we say who or what kicks, and the answer is John. So John is our subject and kicks is our verb. There are a couple of special rules to keep in mind about subjects and verbs. First of all, no verb preceded by the word to can be the verb of a clause or a sentence. It's called an infinitive. So if you have the sentence, Paul wanted to be a rock star, the verb is wanted, not to be or not be, because be is preceded by the word to. There are lots of special little phrases like that that are called verbals. And I'm not going to ask you to be able to identify by name the different types of verbals because that's just silly stuff that only English teachers care about, and there's no reason for you to waste room in your brain with that kind of jargon. Just remember that no verb that has the word to right in front of it is actually a verb. There has to be another word that is the verb. Here's a tricky one. No word that ends in ing but doesn't have a helping verb in front of it can be the verb of a clause or a sentence. But it might be the subject. Yes, an ing word can be a noun and can be a subject. Let me give you an example. Growing orchids is difficult. Now, since we know the ing word doesn't have any helping verbs in front of it, we have to look for another word for the verb. The verb is. Okay? Now, what we are actually saying is that something is difficult. So what is difficult? Orchids aren't difficult. I know some people who are difficult, but I've never met a plant who is difficult to get along with, which is what difficult means in a case like that, right? So, if we know that orchids isn't the subject because orchids aren't difficult, what is difficult? Growing is difficult. It is the task of planting and nurturing and bringing to full bloom the orchid. It's what you have to do with that plant that's difficult. It's not the flower that's being difficult. It's the action that's difficult. So growing is difficult. Growing orchids is difficult. Is the verb and growing is the subject. Now I know that's tricky, but that's English for you. The grammar gods are just nasty, nasty people, whoever they are, and they do everything they can to confuse us. But just remember that no word that ends in ing that doesn't have any helping verbs in front of it is the verb, but it might be the subject. Okay, we're back to our same sentences again. So let's go through and identify the subjects and verbs in these sentences. Now, you should already have the list of verbs in front of you because we just did those, right? So we look at the first sentence. Marcy walked to work. We've already said that the verb is walked, so to find the subject, we ask, who or what walked? Marcy walked. Okay, so Marcy is the subject and walked is the verb. We've already identified that the subject of the next sentence, Andrea is Sophia's sister, the verb is. So we ask ourselves, who or what is, and the answer is Andrea. So Andrea is the subject and is the verb. Next, we've already identified dates and is as verbs. So first we ask, who or what dates? Well, Marissa dates. So Marissa is the subject that goes with dates. And then we ask who or what is. Well, actually, who is. Okay? And who in this case is a pronoun that refers to Antonio. Okay? So who is the subject of the last bit of that sentence and is the verb. The river flows and tumbles through the valley. The verbs are flows, tumbles. Who or what flows and tumbles? River. So river is the subject, flows, tumbles are the verbs. Next we have Michelle and Alfredo stayed for the whole game, but Carmen and Jose left early. And we already know that we have two verbs here, stayed, left. Okay. Who or what stayed? Michelle and Alfredo stayed. Who or what left? Carmen and Jose left. So, Michelle and Alfredo are the subjects. Stayed is the verb of the first part of that sentence. Carmen and Jose is the subject. Left is the verb of the second part of that sentence. Nayeli seems like a nice woman. We know that seems is a verb. It's a state of being verb. Who or what seems? Nayeli seems. Okay. For the next one, we've already identified that will have been working is the verb. Who or what will have been working? Brenda will have been working at the hospital for 5 years in November. Okay? So will have been working is the verb, and Brenda is the subject. We know from working on this earlier that should have mode, watched, are verbs, right? So who or what should have mode? Lee should have mode. So the verb for that part of the sentence is should have mode, and Lee is the subject. Then we had the verb watched. Who or what watched? He watched. So he is the subject that goes with that part, with that verb. Then we have, although Daniel felt fine, he went to see his doctor. And we know already that felt is a verb, one of those state of being verbs. Went is the verb, an action verb. So we say, who or what felt? Daniel felt. So Daniel is the subject that goes with the verb felt. The next verb is went. Who or what went? He went. So he is the subject that's paired with went. And then the last one, which is a quote from On the Waterfront, for those of you who don't know classic movies. It's a very, very old movie starring Marlon Brando, and he says this, I could have been a contender. I know I can't do impressions. Okay, so we have our verb, could have been, and we ask who or what could have been? The answer is I. So I is the subject, and could have been was a verb. Now that's just a really quick review of subjects and verbs, and you probably knew all of this stuff already, but I just wanted to go through it very quickly for you so that we can move on to working on identifying phrases and clauses, and then into working with sentence fragments, run-ons, and comma splices. Remember, if you have any questions, just email me, and what do we know? We know we have to email from an account other than Canvas at deborah.oakey@csn.edu. Thanks a lot. We'll be getting together again very soon to talk about identifying phrases and clauses.